I found my husband's secret journal today. Inside were 1,095 entries, one for every night of our marriage. Every single page was about me, how he watched me sleep, how he ached to touch me, how loving me was killing him. For 3 years, I thought Kento hated me. Turns out he loved me so much he was willing to destroy himself to keep me alive. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to tonight, the night everything shattered. The weight of Egyptian cotton sheets felt like chains. Mira lay motionless in the California king bed, listening to the sound of her own breathing, the only proof she still existed in this gilded prison. The bedroom was fit for royalty, all marble and crystal, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Tokyo's neon-drenched skyline. For the 207th night in a row, Kento had dressed for bed without once looking at her. 3 years, 1,095 nights of marriage, and she could count on one hand the number of times he had touched her with anything beyond cold politeness. Not the passion she craved, not the intimacy married people were supposed to share, not even the simple comfort of his hand holding hers as they fell asleep. When did loving him become this painful? Mira pulled the covers up to her chin and turned toward the window. Their penthouse was worth more than entire city blocks. Every surface gleamed with obscene luxury. Every painting, every piece of furniture, every diamond choker in her closet screamed wealth and power. But none of it filled the hollow ache in her chest when Kento buttoned his suit jacket at 3 a.m. like he was fastening armor against her. The cruelest part was the mystery of it all. Before their wedding, Kento had been different. He would save her from danger and look at her like she was worth dying for. He would trace her collarbone with his scarred hands and whisper promises in the dark. He would smile. Actually smile. When she walked into a room, that rare, devastating smile that made her heart stop. Now he barely acknowledged her presence at all. Maybe he regrets marrying me, she thought, pressing her palms against her face. But that made no sense. She took care of herself. She learned his world. She became the perfect Yakuza wife without complaint, navigating dangerous social circles with grace, never asking questions about the blood on his shirts. Yet Kento treated her like fragile porcelain, something to be protected behind glass and never, ever touched. The bedroom door opened with a soft click. Kento stepped inside, still dressed in the black Armani suit he'd worn to whatever meeting kept him away until this ungodly hour. Even exhausted, he looked devastating. Sharp jawline that could cut glass, dark eyes that could command a room with a single glance, intricate tattoos crawling up his neck like beautiful warnings, dragons and chrysanthemums that spoke of violence and honor in equal measure. He was the kind of handsome that made people afraid and attracted in equal measure. But to Mira, he might as well have been a stranger wearing her husband's face. "You're still awake," he said, his voice carefully neutral. He began removing his cufflinks without meeting her eyes, as if she were just another piece of expensive furniture. "I live here too," Mira said quietly, her voice steadier than her thundering heart. "This is my bed too." Kento's fingers stilled for just a heartbeat before continuing their methodical work. He said nothing. Of course he said nothing. 3 years ago, everything had been different. Mira could still remember the night Kento saved her life with perfect, painful clarity. She'd been walking home from her gallery opening when 4 men cornered her in a Shibuya side street. Brutal, merciless, their intentions written in every step they took toward her. Then Kento appeared like something out of a nightmare, made righteous. He moved with lethal precision, and within minutes her attackers were unconscious on the ground, bones broken, blood pooling on wet pavement. He'd looked at her then with such intensity, such raw concern, that Mira's fear transformed into something else entirely, something dangerous and thrilling and utterly consuming. "You're safe now," he'd said, his scarred hand gentle as it steadied her trembling shoulders. But safety came with a price she didn't understand at the time. Kento discovered the gang responsible for the attack was connected to his world, his enemies, his wars, his blood-soaked empire. To truly protect her, he needed to claim her in a way no one would dare challenge. So he married her, a contract sealed with vows and witnesses and a ring that cost more than most people's homes. Mira had thought it was love. She'd believed the wedding was real, that the man who held her hand during the ceremony was giving her his heart, along with his name. She didn't know then that Kento was Tokyo's most feared Yakuza boss. She didn't know his love had already died once, bleeding out in his arms. A woman whose name he never spoke, whose death carved something cold and immovable into his soul. His distance was protection. His coldness was sacrifice. Every night he refused to touch her. Every morning he left before she woke. Every moment he treated her like a beautiful obligation instead of his wife. It was all his twisted version of love, because Kento believed that everyone he loved died screaming, and he would rather suffer alone than bury Mira beside the ghosts already haunting him. But Mira didn't know any of this. All she knew was the crushing weight of rejection, night after night, year after year. She knew the white orchids that appeared on her pillow each morning, apologies without explanations. She knew the designer clothes, the jewelry, the luxury that surrounded her like a monument to everything money could buy except the one thing she needed: him. Tonight, something inside Mira finally cracked. She waited until Kento disappeared into the bathroom, then quietly slipped out of bed. Her hands trembled as she pulled her leather suitcase from the walk-in closet. Each item she folded felt like a small death. This silk blouse he bought her in Paris. Those pearl earrings he'd given her for their anniversary. The perfume he said reminded him of jasmine in spring. Gifts from a husband who wouldn't even sleep beside her. Tears blurred her vision as she packed, moving on autopilot, her heart breaking with each folded memory. 3 years of trying. 3 years of hoping he would finally see her, touch her, love her the way she desperately loved him. But hope could only survive so much starvation. She heard the bathroom door open, heard Kento's footsteps pause, felt his eyes burning into her back. Mira. His voice was low, almost frightened. "What are you doing?" She didn't turn around, couldn't. If she looked at him, she might lose her nerve. "I can't do this anymore, Kento," she whispered, folding another shirt with shaking hands. "I can't live like I'm invisible, like I don't exist except as something for you to protect from a distance." The silence that followed felt like the end of the world. "I deserve a husband," Mira continued, her voice breaking on every word. "Not a bodyguard, not a keeper, not someone who treats me like a duty he can't escape." She finally turned to face him, tears streaming down her face, and saw something she'd never seen before in Kento's carefully controlled expression: terror. Kento stood frozen in the doorway, his entire body rigid as stone. The terror Mira had glimpsed transformed into something raw, something that looked almost like pain. His jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. His scarred hands curled into fists at his sides, knuckles white with the effort of restraint. "Mira," he said again, her name sounding broken in his mouth. "Don't." It wasn't a command. It was a plea. But 3 years of silence had taught Mira that pleas, without explanations, meant nothing. She turned back to her suitcase, blinking away tears, and reached for the nightstand to grab her phone charger. Her hand accidentally knocked against the drawer. It slid open with a wooden scrape that seemed too loud in the suffocating quiet. Papers scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. Mira bent to gather them, irritation flashing through her grief, until she saw what they were. Photographs, dozens of them, all of her. Her breath caught in her throat. There she was, asleep in this very bed, moonlight painting her face peaceful. There she was in the rooftop garden, laughing at something on her phone. There she was reading on the balcony, completely unaware someone was watching. Picture after picture after picture. Moments she didn't know had been captured, didn't know had been witnessed, didn't know had mattered to anyone. "What is this?" she whispered, her hands trembling as she sifted through the evidence of obsession disguised as indifference. Kento moved so fast she barely saw him cross the room. He dropped to his knees beside her, reaching for the photographs like they were something precious and damning all at once. But Mira's attention had already shifted to something else that had fallen from the drawer. A leather journal, worn at the edges, expensive but used, the kind of thing someone wrote in every single day. She picked it up before Kento could stop her. His hand shot out, fingers wrapping around her wrist. Not hard, never hard, but desperate. "Mira, please." She looked up at him. this beautiful broken man kneeling beside her with fear written across every sharp feature. "What is this, Kento?" When he didn't answer, she pulled her wrist free and opened the journal. The first page stole the air from her lungs. Day 8:47. She smiled at me this morning. I pretended not to notice. I'm a coward. Day 9:23. I stood over her while she slept, just watching, making sure she was breathing, making sure she was safe, making sure she was still mine even though I have no right to claim her. Day 1C1. She wore that emerald dress I bought her. I wanted to tell her she looked breathtaking. Instead, I left the room. I will not love her. I will not lose her. Mira's vision blurred as she flipped through page after page of confessions. His handwriting was sharp and controlled, but the words were anything but. I love her too much. Love is death. I will not bury another woman I failed to protect. She asked me today why I married her if I can't even touch her. I wanted to say, because touching you would make this real, and real things die. Every night I watch her sleep and memorize the way she breathes. If something happens to her, I want to remember what it sounded like when she was alive. I am obsessed with her. I am terrified of her. I am in love with her, and it's going to destroy us both. Kento, Mira breathed, looking up at him with tears streaming down her face. What is this? He was shaking. This man who commanded an empire, who made grown men fear his shadow, who moved through violence like it was a second language. He was shaking like a boy caught in a truth too big to hide anymore. Everyone I love dies, he said, his voice fracturing on every word. His dark eyes glistened with something that looked dangerously close to tears. My mother, my sister, the woman I loved before you, she died because of me. Because loving me made her a target. Because I was too arrogant to see the danger until it was too late. Mira's heart cracked open. So when I saved you that night, Kento continued, his fists clenching and unclenching against his thighs, when I realized my enemies would come for you just because you'd been seen with me, I had two choices. Let you go and hope they'd lose interest, or bind you to me so completely that no one would dare touch you. You married me to protect me, Mira whispered, the pieces finally falling into place. I married you to keep you alive, Kento corrected, his voice raw. My distance, it's the only way to keep you breathing. If I let myself love you the way I... He stopped, jaw working, fighting against words that wanted to escape. If I let myself love you, you become the weakness they'll exploit. You become the knife they'll use to destroy me. You become the next woman I bury. So you've been loving me in secret, Mira said, her voice breaking, watching me from a distance, writing about me, photographing me, drowning in wanting me while pretending you don't care. Yes. The word came out like a confession whispered in church, like absolution he didn't deserve. Mira dropped the journal and reached for his face with both hands. Kento flinched, actually flinched, as if her touch might burn him alive. But she didn't pull away. For the first time in 3 years, she touched her husband's face, felt the sharp line of his jaw beneath her palms, saw the way his eyes fluttered closed like a man receiving a blessing he'd been denied for centuries. I would have chosen you anyway, she whispered fiercely, even knowing the danger, even knowing I might die. I would have chosen a single day of being truly loved by you over a lifetime of this beautiful, empty safety. Kento's eyes opened. The look in them was pure devastation. Mira! That's when the alarm started screaming. The sound was deafening, sharp, mechanical, the kind of warning that meant the impossible had happened. Kento's entire body transformed in an instant. The vulnerable man vanished, replaced by something lethal and precise. His eyes went cold. His movements became predatory. Get down, he commanded, his voice like steel scraping against stone. But before Mira could move, the bedroom window exploded inward in a shower of glass and gunfire. Kento threw himself over her, his body a shield, his arms locked around her as bullets tore through the luxury that had surrounded them like a lie. The sound was chaos, glass shattering, wood splintering, the rapid-fire percussion of automatic weapons turning their golden cage into a war zone. "Stay behind me," he growled against her hair, already pulling a gun from somewhere Mira hadn't known he kept weapons. "Do not leave my side. Do you understand?" Mira nodded, too shocked to speak, her heart hammering against her ribs like it was trying to escape. Through the shattered window, she could hear shouting in Korean, Japanese, languages she couldn't identify. Gunfire, the sounds of violence pouring into their penthouse like a flood that had finally breached the dam. Kento's enemies had finally come, and now, with Mira's packed suitcase mocking them from across the room, they would learn exactly what happened when someone threatened the only thing Tokyo's most feared Yakuza boss had ever truly loved. Kento moved like death, given human form. Mira watched from behind the overturned dresser where he'd shoved her, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. The man she'd married, the one who wouldn't even hold her hand, was now a nightmare of precision and violence. He fired 3 shots in rapid succession. 3 bodies dropped through the shattered window. Another intruder burst through the bedroom door, tactical gear, assault rifle, face covered. Kento didn't hesitate. He closed the distance in 2 strides, disarmed the man with a brutal twist that made bones crack audibly, and finished him with cold efficiency that stole Mira's breath. The body hit the marble floor with a wet thud. "Stay down," Kento commanded without looking at her, already moving toward the hallway where more footsteps thundered like a stampede. Mira pressed herself against the wall, glass crunching beneath her knees. Her silk pajamas were soaked with something she didn't want to identify. Terror flooded her veins, cold and paralyzing. But beneath it, threading through the fear like gold through rock, was something else. Awe. This was who Kento truly was. Not the distant husband, not the man who hid behind walls of silence. This was the Yakuza boss who ruled Tokyo's underworld with an iron fist wrapped in expensive suits. The man whose name made grown men lower their voices. The monster who had been protecting her all along by pretending he didn't care. More gunfire erupted from downstairs. Automatic weapons, shotguns, the distinctive crack of pistols, the sounds of a full-scale assault. Kento returned seconds later, blood splattered across his white shirt. His dark eyes scanned the room with lethal focus before landing on her. "You're bleeding," Mira whispered, seeing the gash across his forearm. "It's not mine," he said flatly, already pulling her to her feet with his uninjured hand. "We need to move. Now." He dragged her through the penthouse's hidden corridors, passages Mira never knew existed. Behind them, she could hear shouting, the chaos of his security team engaging the intruders, the sounds of a war being fought in the home she'd thought was a prison. Kento keyed a code into a panel disguised as decorative molding. A section of wall slid open, revealing a reinforced steel door. Beyond it lay a room Mira had never seen. Small, windowless, lined with weapons and surveillance monitors showing every angle of their penthouse. A panic room. He shoved her inside and sealed the door behind them. The sudden silence was deafening. On the monitors, Mira could see bodies. Blood. Men in tactical gear searching room by room with military precision, executing wounded security guards with casual brutality. "They came for you," Kento said, his voice hollow as he watched the screens. His hands were shaking. The first time Mira had ever seen him lose control. "Not me, you." He pointed at one of the monitors showing their bedroom. "They bypassed every security measure I installed. They knew exactly where our bedroom was. They knew you'd be there. His voice cracked. "This is my worst fear made real." Mira's blood turned to ice. "What do you mean they came for me?" Kento turned to face her, and the raw agony in his expression made her chest tight. "The Huang Syndicate, my rivals. They've been watching us for months, waiting for the perfect moment to strike." He gestured violently at the monitors. "They don't want to kill me, Mira. They want to destroy me. And the best way to destroy a man like me is to take away the only thing he—" He stopped himself, fists clenching so hard his knuckles went white. "The only thing he loves," Mira finished softly. "Yes." The word came out broken. Kento turned away from her, pressing his palms against the steel wall like he needed it to hold him upright. His shoulders shook with the weight of 3 years of restraint finally collapsing. "This is why I stayed away," he said, his voice fracturing. "This is why I couldn't, why I wouldn't—" He couldn't finish. Mira's heart shattered and rebuilt itself in the same breath. All this time she'd thought he didn't want her, that she wasn't enough, that his distance was rejection. But it was never about her inadequacy. It was about his terror, his guilt, his desperate, twisted attempt to keep her alive by making everyone believe she didn't matter to him. "Kento," she said, stepping toward him. "Don't." But there was no force behind the word, just exhaustion, just defeat. "For 3 years. I thought you regretted marrying me," Mira continued, her voice steady now. Clear. Certain. "I thought I was just an obligation you couldn't escape, but that was never true, was it?" She reached for his shoulder, forcing him to turn and face her. "You loved me so much, it terrified you. You loved me so much you thought the only way to keep me safe was to keep me at arm's length." He didn't deny it. Tears streamed down Mira's face, but her voice didn't waver. "Well, I have something to tell you. I would rather live one day truly loved by you and die knowing what that felt like than spend another 3 years in that beautiful empty bed wondering if I even exist to you." Kento's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "You don't understand what you're asking for." "I'm not asking anymore," Mira said fiercely. "I'm telling you. I choose you. I choose this life. I choose the danger if it means I get to have you, all of you." She stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating off his body. "The distance was killing me anyway, Kento, so what's the difference?" Something in him broke. He reached for her face with trembling hands, those same hands that had just killed men without hesitation, now shaking like he was touching something holy. "If I let myself love you the way I want to," he whispered, his voice raw and wrecked, "I will never pull away again. Do you understand? I won't be able to stop. I won't be able to pretend. You'll see every dark, obsessive, dangerous part of me that I've kept locked away." "Good," Mira breathed. "Show me." Kento closed the distance between them and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was 3 years of starvation finally given permission to feast. His mouth claimed hers with desperate hunger, his hands tangling in her hair, pulling her closer like he was trying to fuse them into one being. Mira gasped against him, her fingers clutching his blood-stained shirt, kissing him back with equal ferocity. This was intimacy. This was marriage. This was love, stripped of pretense and exposed in all its terrifying, consuming glory. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kento pressed his forehead against hers. "I will never pull away from you again," he vowed, his voice a rough whisper. "Whatever happens, whatever they try to do, you're mine, and I'm done pretending otherwise." "Promise me," Mira demanded, her hands framing his face. "I promise." He kissed her again, softer this time, reverent, sealing the vow between them like a sacred oath. On the monitors behind them, one of Kento's security team burst into the surveillance feed, speaking urgently into a radio. Blood covered half his face. Kento pulled away reluctantly, his eyes never leaving Mira's as he reached for the intercom. "Report," he commanded, his voice shifting back into that cold, lethal tone that made men obey without question. The response made his jaw clench. "The immediate threat is neutralized, sir, but we've intercepted communications. The Huang Syndicate is regrouping. This was just the first wave. They're planning something bigger." Kento's hand tightened around Mira's. "How long do we have?" "Unknown, sir. But they know she's your weakness now. They won't stop until I'm destroyed," Kento finished darkly. He looked at Mira, and she saw the decision forming behind his eyes. Not distance this time, not protection through absence. War. "Then we don't wait for them to come back," Kento said, his voice cold steel and burning rage combined. "We end this tonight." Mira's pulse quickened. "What does that mean?" Kento pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Possessive, protective, utterly unyielding. "It means anyone who threatens you dies," he murmured against her skin. "It means I burn their entire organization to the ground. It means I stop being merciful." His dark eyes met hers, and in them, Mira saw the true monster she'd married. "It means," Kento whispered against her lips, "I go to war for my wife." Mira should have been terrified, should have recoiled from the violence in his voice, the promise of death in his eyes. Instead, she felt something else entirely, safe. For the first time in 3 years, she felt truly, completely safe. Because this man, this beautiful, broken, dangerous man, would burn the world to ash before he let anyone take her from him. "Then let's end this," she said quietly. Kento's eyes widened slightly. "You don't know what you're saying." "Don't I?" Mira's voice was steady. "For 3 years, I've lived in your world without knowing it. I've smiled at men who've killed. I've attended parties funded by blood money. I've been your wife in everything except the ways that matter." She grabbed his shirt, pulling him closer. "So stop protecting me from the truth. I'm already in this. I've always been in this. The only difference is now I'm choosing it with my eyes open." Kento stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." He kissed her again, quick, hard, full of promise and possession, before turning back to the intercom. "Assemble the family," he commanded. "Every captain, every soldier, everyone who owes me blood or loyalty. We meet in 1 hour." "Yes, sir." Kento released the intercom and pulled a hidden panel in the wall, revealing an arsenal that made Mira's breath catch. Guns, knives, tactical gear, everything needed for war. "There's no going back after tonight," he said quietly, strapping a holster to his chest. "Once I do this, once I make it clear you're mine, every enemy I have will know. You'll never be invisible again." "Good," Mira said. "I'm tired of being invisible." Kento was already moving, pulling weapons from hidden compartments in the panic room walls. His movements were sharp, efficient, practiced. He strapped a knife to his ankle, checked the magazine of his gun, slid extra clips into his pockets. His face was set in that cold, lethal mask Mira had seen him wear while killing intruders minutes ago. "There's a car waiting in the underground garage," he said without looking at her, his voice clipped and professional. "My most trusted guard will take you to the safe house in Osaka. You'll be—" "No." Kento's hand stilled. He turned slowly, disbelief flickering across his features. "What?" "I said no." Mira stepped forward, her chin lifted, her eyes blazing with determination. "I'm not running. I'm not hiding. I'm done being the fragile thing you protect from a distance. Mira, this isn't a discussion." "You're right, it's not." She closed the space between them, placing her hand flat against his chest, feeling his heart hammering beneath blood-stained fabric. "For 3 years you pushed me away to keep me safe. For 3 years I lived half alive because you thought distance would protect me." She looked up at him, unflinching. "But they came for me anyway, Kento. Your plan failed." His jaw clenched. "Which is exactly why you need to leave. Now, before what? Before they kill me? Before they use me against you?" Mira's voice rose, fierce and unwavering. "They already know I'm your weakness. Sending me away won't change that. It'll just mean I'm alone when they find me again." Kento flinched as if she'd struck him. "I'm done running from your love," Mira said, softer now but no less resolute. "Let me stay by your side. Let me be your partner, not your prisoner. We face this together, or we don't face it at all." For a long moment, Kento just stared at her, his dark eyes searching her face like he was looking for cracks in her resolve. He found none. Then something shifted in his expression, that careful control cracking open to reveal the man beneath, the one who had filled journals with confessions, the one who had photographed her sleeping, just to have proof she was real. "If you stay," he said roughly, his hands coming up to cup her face, "you see everything, the violence, the darkness, all of it." "I already have," Mira reminded him, glancing at the monitors still showing bodies scattered across their penthouse. "And I'm still here." Kento's thumb traced her cheekbone, his touch reverent despite the blood drying on his hands. "Then stay close. Do exactly what I tell you. And if anything happens to me—" "Nothing will happen to you," Mira interrupted fiercely, "because I won't let it." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, the first real smile she'd seen in 3 years. "My fearless wife." "Your only wife," she corrected. He kissed her then, quick and hard and full of promise, before pulling away and handing her a small pistol from the weapons cache. "Do you know how to use this?" "Mira, checked the safety with practiced ease, ejected the magazine to verify it was loaded, slammed it back into place with a satisfying click. Kento's eyebrows rose in surprise. "You thought I lived in a Yakuza boss's penthouse for 3 years and didn't learn?" she asked dryly. "I might have been lonely, Kento, but I wasn't stupid." His eyes darkened with something that looked like pride and desire mixed together. "I keep underestimating you. Don't make that mistake again." They moved through the penthouse like shadows, Kento leading with lethal grace, while Mira covered their backs the way he taught her in a rushed, 2-minute lesson that somehow felt like it had been building for years. The destruction was worse than the monitors had shown. Bodies of security guards and intruders alike littered the marble floors. Bullet holes riddled the walls. Blood pooled in the grout between expensive tiles. Their golden cage had become a slaughterhouse. Kento's remaining security team had regrouped in the main hall. 12 men, all armed, all waiting for orders. When they saw Mira walking beside Kento, gun in hand, several exchanged surprised glances. Kento's transformation was complete. This was the man who ruled Tokyo's underworld, commanding, ruthless, terrifying. He issued orders in rapid Japanese, his voice cutting through chaos like a blade. "The Huang Syndicate thinks they can threaten my family and walk away," Kento said, his voice carrying through the destroyed penthouse. Each word was ice and fire. "They're wrong. We hit them now. We hit them hard. We end this tonight." A chorus of agreement, fists against chests, the sound of loyalty given freely to a man who commanded it absolutely. Mira stood beside him, gun in hand, her presence a silent declaration that she was no longer the untouchable wife hidden away in a golden cage. She was his partner, his equal, the woman who had chosen the monster and all his darkness. One of the guards, an older man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, stepped forward and bowed deeply to Kento before speaking in Japanese. Kento's expression remained neutral, but Mira caught the slight tension in his shoulders. "What did he say?" she asked quietly. Kento hesitated, then translated. "He asked if I was certain about bringing you. He's concerned for your safety." Mira turned to face the guard directly. In careful, practiced Japanese, learned in secret over 3 years of isolation, she said, "I appreciate your concern, but my place is beside my husband." The guard's eyes widened. Several other men exchanged surprised looks. Kento's hand found the small of her back, a possessive touch that sent electricity down her spine. "My wife has spoken," he said simply. "We move in 10 minutes." The counterattack was swift and brutal. Kento led his team to the Huang Syndicate's operations center across the city, a warehouse district in Shinagawa, where shadows pooled like spilled ink, and the Tokyo Bay stretched dark and infinite beyond rusted shipping containers. They arrived in a convoy of black SUVs, silent as death. Mira stayed close to Kento, exactly as he demanded, her heart pounding but her hands steady. She watched him move through the darkness with the confidence of a man who owned the night itself. Gunfire erupted the moment they breached the perimeter. The Huang Syndicate had been waiting, their own forces positioned throughout the warehouse complex. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness like lightning. The sound was deafening. Automatic weapons, shotguns, the distinctive crack of pistols echoing off metal containers. Kento moved through enemies like an avenging angel, each movement precise, each decision instant and perfect. He fired, reloaded, advanced without hesitation. This was the man she'd married, not the ghost who haunted their bedroom, not the distant stranger who bought her orchids. This was Kento unleashed, powerful and deadly and utterly magnificent. Mira fired when she needed to, covering angles Kento couldn't see, protecting his blind spots the way instinct told her to. She dropped 2 attackers who tried to flank them from behind a container. The recoil jarred her arms, but she didn't flinch. Kento glanced back at her, something like awe flickering across his face before he refocused on the battle. They fought as one unit, moving in sync without needing words. When he advanced, she covered. When he reloaded, she provided suppressing fire. It was a deadly dance they'd never rehearsed, but somehow knew by heart. Then everything went wrong. An attacker emerged from behind a shipping container, young, desperate, gun raised and aimed directly at Kento's unprotected back. Kento was occupied fighting 3 men at once, completely unaware of the fourth approaching from his blind spot. Mira didn't think. She raised her pistol and fired twice. The attacker dropped, his weapon clattering harmlessly to the concrete. Kento spun, shock registering on his face as he saw the body behind him. Then he looked at Mira with something that transcended gratitude. It was recognition. She had just proven what she'd been telling him all along. She wasn't weak. She wasn't helpless. She wasn't porcelain that needed to be protected behind glass. She was his equal. Together, she said simply, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Together, he agreed, something fierce and possessive burning in his eyes. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was likely only minutes. Kento's forces pushed deeper into the warehouse complex, systematically dismantling the Huang Syndicate's defenses. Bodies fell, blood spilled. The night reeked of cordite and death. Finally, they reached the center of operations, a converted office space where the Huang Syndicate's leadership had gathered, surrounded by their remaining guards. Kento didn't hesitate. He walked through the door like he owned the building, Mira at his side, his remaining team fanning out. Behind them, the Huang Syndicate's boss, a man in his 50s with silver hair and cold eyes, sat behind a desk like he'd been expecting them. 6 guards surrounded him, weapons drawn but not yet firing. "Tanaka," the man said in accented Japanese, using Kento's family name. "I was wondering when you'd arrive." "Huang," Kento replied, his voice arctic. "You made a mistake tonight." "Did I?" Huang leaned back in his chair, utterly calm despite being surrounded. "I think I've made my point quite clearly. Your wife is your weakness, and weaknesses can be exploited." Kento's gun never wavered from Huang's forehead. "You're right about one thing," he said quietly. "She is my weakness. But you made a critical error in judgment." "And what's that?" Kento's smile was pure violence. "You assume that made her vulnerable. But a weakness that fights back isn't a weakness anymore. It's a weapon." He glanced at Mira, standing beside him with her gun trained on one of Huang's guards. "My wife just saved my life tonight. She fought beside me. She proved she's not the fragile thing you thought you could use against me." His voice dropped to something deadly. "She's my partner, my equal, and anyone who threatens her doesn't just face my wrath, they face hers too." Huang's composure finally cracked, fear flickering across his features. "So here's what's going to happen," Kento continued, his voice soft and terrible. "Your syndicate ends tonight. Your operations, your territory, your legacy, all of it burns, and you're going to watch it happen before I decide whether you deserve to see tomorrow." "You can't." "I can, and I will." Kento fired once. The bullet shattered a glass of whiskey on Huang's desk, spraying amber liquid across expensive wood. That was a warning. The next one isn't. What followed was brutal and efficient. Kento dismantled the Huang Syndicate with surgical precision, seizing their assets, scattering their forces, leaving their leadership broken and powerless. By the time they left the warehouse, the Huang Syndicate had ceased to exist as a viable threat. Kento had won, but more importantly, he'd done it with Mira at his side, not hidden away, not protected from a distance, but standing beside him as his equal, his partner, his wife in every sense of the word. When they returned to the SUV, blood-stained and exhausted, Kento pulled Mira close in the back seat. His hands shook as they cupped her face, his eyes searching hers with raw vulnerability. "You could have died tonight," he whispered. "So could you," Mira replied. "But we didn't, because we had each other." Kento kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips, desperate, relieved kisses that tasted like gratitude and love and promise. "I'm never letting you go," he murmured against her mouth. "Never again." "Good," Mira breathed, "because I'm not going anywhere." Dawn broke over Tokyo like a wound, all crimson and gold bleeding across the skyline. Mira stood at the shattered window of their penthouse, watching the city wake up, completely unaware that its underworld had shifted overnight. Her hands were wrapped around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. She couldn't stop staring at her reflection in the broken glass. The woman looking back at her was a stranger. Blood spattered her silk pajamas, some hers, most not. Her hair was tangled with glass shards that caught the early light like diamonds. Her hands, soft hands that had once only held paintbrushes and wine glasses, had pulled a trigger 4 times tonight. 4 times. 4 men were dead because of her. She waited for the guilt to come, the horror, the crushing weight of taking human life. It never did. Maybe that should have terrified her. Maybe it said something dark about who she really was beneath the polished exterior. But all Mira felt was a strange, crystalline clarity. She had protected what was hers, and she would do it again. You should be resting. Kento's voice came from behind her, rough with exhaustion. She heard him cross the room, felt the heat of his body as he stopped just behind her, not touching, still giving her space even now. Some habits died hard. I can't sleep, Mira said quietly, still staring at her reflection. Every time I close my eyes, I see... She stopped, uncertain how to finish. What did she see? The attack? The bodies? The moment she'd killed to protect him? Me too, Kento admitted. His hand came to rest on her shoulder, tentative, like he was still learning that he was allowed to touch her. After my first kill, I didn't sleep for 3 days. Mira turned to face him. In the dawn light, he looked devastating and destroyed all at once. Someone had bandaged the gash on his forearm. His shirt was gone, revealing the full extent of his tattoos, dragons and chrysanthemums covering his chest, his shoulders, his back. Beautiful and terrible. Art made from violence. Does it get easier? She asked. Kento's jaw tightened. No, it gets necessary. There's a difference. He reached for her face with his unbandaged hand, his thumb tracing her cheekbone, with a gentleness that contradicted everything he'd done tonight. I never wanted this for you, he said, his voice breaking on the edges. I never wanted you to know what it feels like to take a life, to carry that weight. That's why I kept you away. That's why I know, Mira interrupted softly, but it's too late for that now. I'm already here. I've already crossed that line. She placed her hand over his, pressing it harder against her face. And I don't regret it. Not for a second. Because those men came to hurt you, to take you from me. And I won't apologize for refusing to let that happen. Kento's eyes glistened with something that looked dangerously close to tears. You saved my life tonight, he said roughly. That attacker behind me, I never saw him. If you hadn't... He couldn't finish. The weight of that reality, that he had come within seconds of death, hung between them like smoke. Then we're even, Mira said. You've been saving my life for 3 years. I just finally got the chance to return the favor. Kento pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her with desperate strength. She felt his heart hammering against her ear, felt the tremor running through his powerful frame. I could have lost you, he whispered into her hair. When that window exploded, when the bullets started flying, all I could think was that I'd waited too long, that I'd wasted 3 years keeping you at arm's length, and now I was going to lose you before I ever really had you. Mira pulled back enough to look up at him. But you didn't lose me. I'm right here. You are, he said, wonder creeping into his voice like he still couldn't quite believe it. You're really here. You stayed. After everything you saw, everything I made you do. You didn't make me do anything, Mira corrected firmly. I chose this. I chose you. I chose us. She stood on her toes and kissed him, soft and slow and deliberate. Tasting the salt of his sweat, the copper tang of blood, the desperation of a man who'd spent 3 years starving and was only now learning to feast. When they broke apart, Kento rested his forehead against hers. The penthouse isn't safe anymore, he said quietly. They know where we live. They know our defenses. We need to relocate. Where? I have a private estate in Hakone, remote, secure, beautiful. His hand slid down her arms. We'll go there until I can ensure the city is completely under control, until every remaining member of the Huang Syndicate is found and dealt with. Mira nodded. When do we leave? 2 hours. I need to meet with my captains first, make sure the transition of power is smooth. Huang's territory needs to be absorbed before someone else tries to claim it. He stepped back, his eyes roaming over her with an intensity that made her skin burn. You should shower, change, Try to eat something. Will you join me? The question came out more vulnerable than Mira intended. In the shower, I mean. I don't want to be alone right now. Kento's expression softened. Of course. The shower was large enough for 6 people, all marble and rainfall shower heads, and enough luxury to make normal people weep. But Mira barely noticed any of it. She was too focused on Kento. On the way, his hands moved over her skin with reverent gentleness, washing away the blood and glass and gunpowder residue. On the way, he shampooed her hair like she was something precious, his fingers massaging her scalp until she nearly melted. On the way, he looked at her, really looked at her, like he was memorizing every inch. I used to watch you shower, he admitted quietly, water streaming down his face. Through the security cameras, I told myself it was about protection, making sure you were safe. His hands stilled on her shoulders. But that was a lie. I watched because I couldn't help myself, because seeing you was the only way I could breathe, even if it was through a screen, even if you didn't know I was there. Mira turned to face him fully. Show me. What? Show me where the cameras are. I want to see what you saw. I want to understand. Kento hesitated, then pointed to a nearly invisible lens embedded in the ceiling molding. There. And there. Another in the mirror. And there. A third near the towel rack. Mira looked at each one, imagining Kento in his office or the panic room, watching her on a dozen screens, obsessing, aching, drowning in wanting her while pretending indifference. Were you watching that night 3 months ago? She asked. When I cried in here for an hour because it was our anniversary and you'd forgotten? Kento's face crumbled. I didn't forget. I was watching, and it took everything in me not to come to you, not to hold you, not to tell you the truth. What stopped you? Fear, cowardice, the certainty that loving you openly would get you killed. He cupped her face with both hands. I was wrong. Distance didn't protect you. It just made us both miserable. Mira kissed him then, hard and claiming, pressing him back against the marble wall, his hands tangled in her wet hair, his mouth opening under hers with a groan that sounded like surrender. They made love under the water, urgent and desperate and real. 3 years of longing compressed into frantic touches and whispered names and the overwhelming need to confirm they were both alive, both here, both finally together. Afterward, wrapped in towels and each other, Kento carried her to the bed, the same bed they'd shared but never truly occupied together. Sleep, he murmured against her temple. I'll wake you before we leave. Don't go, Mira said, her hand fisting in his hair. Please, just stay for a few minutes. I'm not going anywhere, Kento promised. Not ever again. He pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her waist, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. For the first time in their marriage, Mira felt what she'd been craving for 3 years. Safe. Loved. Home. She woke to voices, male voices speaking rapid Japanese in the living room. Mira sat up, disoriented, and realized Kento was gone. The bed beside her was cold. He'd let her sleep while he conducted business. She should have been annoyed. Instead, she found herself smiling. Some things would take time to change. Mira dressed quickly in clean clothes, black jeans, a silk blouse, practical boots. If they were relocating to Hakone, she wanted to be ready for anything. She was done with delicate dresses and impractical heels. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Kento standing in the destroyed living room with 5 men she recognized from last night's battle, his captains, the ones who led his various operations throughout the city. They all stopped talking when she appeared. Kento's eyes found her immediately, something possessive and warm flickering across his face. Gentlemen, he said in Japanese, my wife. The men bowed respectfully, deeper than before, more sincere. Because last night, Mira had proven she wasn't just decoration. She was dangerous in her own right. The transition is complete, one of the captains, a man named Sato, reported. Huang's remaining forces have either sworn allegiance or scattered. His territory is ours. Casualties? Kento asked. 7 dead, 14 wounded. All are being compensated. Kento nodded, his face expressionless. But Mira saw the way his jaw tightened. 7 families would receive death benefits today because of decisions he'd made. And the cleanup? Handled. The penthouse will be restored within the week, but I recommend relocating permanently. This location is compromised. Already planned, Kento said. We leave for Hakone in an hour. Another captain, younger, with a scar across his throat, stepped forward. Sir, there's one more matter. Huang himself. He's currently in our custody, awaiting your decision. The room went silent. Mira understood what was being asked. Huang had orchestrated the attack on their home, had ordered her death. In Kento's world, there was only one appropriate response. Kento's eyes found hers across the room. What do you think should happen to him? Every man in the room turned to stare at her, shock evident on their faces. Kento was asking his wife, a civilian, a woman who'd only entered this world last night, for her opinion on a matter of Yakuza justice. Mira met his gaze steadily. He tried to kill us, to destroy everything you've built, to use me as a weapon against you. She paused, thinking of the journal entries, the photographs, the 3 years of suffering caused by Kento's fear that something exactly like this would happen. He made his choice, she said quietly. Now he lives with the consequences, or doesn't live at all. Kento's expression didn't change, but she saw approval flicker in his eyes. You heard my wife, he said to his captains. Huang dies today. Make it clean, make it quick, but make sure every syndicate in Tokyo knows why. The men bowed and filed out, leaving Kento and Mira alone in the destroyed penthouse. You didn't have to ask me, Mira said once they were gone. Yes, I did, Kento replied, crossing to her. You're not just my wife anymore. You're my partner, my equal. That means your voice matters. Your opinion shapes my decisions. He pulled her close, his hands settling on her waist. Last night changed everything. You proved you can handle this world, that you can thrive in it, that you're stronger than I ever gave you credit for. His voice dropped to a whisper. I won't make the mistake of underestimating you again. Mira smiled against his chest. Good, because I have opinions about a lot of things in your organization. Kento actually laughed, a real laugh, warm and genuine. I'm sure you do. The estate in Hakone was nothing like the penthouse. Where Tokyo had been all sharp edges and glass, this was soft and ancient. A traditional Japanese villa nestled in the mountains, surrounded by bamboo forests and hot springs. The main house was over 200 years old, all dark wood and paper screens, with gardens that looked like paintings come to life. Mira stood on the engawa, the traditional wooden veranda, watching mist rise from the private onsen in the garden. 2 days had passed since the attack, 2 days since her world had shattered and rebuilt itself into something entirely new. 2 days of learning what it meant to be truly married to Kento. He hadn't left her side except when absolutely necessary. They ate together, bathed together, slept tangled in each other like they were making up for 3 years of distance all at once. His hands were constantly on her waist, her hair, her face, as if he needed the physical contact to believe she was real. And the nights. Mira felt heat crawl up her neck just thinking about it. The nights were a revelation. Kento loved her with an intensity that bordered on worship, learning her body with the same focused precision he applied to everything else. He was insatiable, making up for lost time with desperate passion tempered by surprising tenderness. You're smiling. His voice came from behind her, warm and intimate, arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. Kento rested his chin on her shoulder, his breath warm against her neck. I'm happy, Mira admitted. Is that allowed? After everything? After everything, it's required, Kento murmured. He pressed a kiss to the curve of her neck. I want you happy. I want you smiling. I want to spend the rest of my life making up for the 3 years I wasted being a coward. Mira turned in his arms to face him. In the soft morning light, he looked younger. The harsh lines of stress had eased from his face. He was wearing a simple black yukata, his tattoos peeking out from the collar, his hair still damp from their morning bath. He looked like a man finally at peace. You weren't a coward, she said, tracing the line of his jaw. You were terrified. There's a difference. I hurt you. For 3 years, I hurt you. And now you're healing me, Mira countered. Every touch, every word. Every moment you choose me instead of fear. You're healing both of us." Kento's eyes glistened. He pulled her closer, burying his face in her hair. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other, listening to the sound of bamboo creaking in the wind. Later that afternoon, Kento's Lieutenant Sato arrived with updates from Tokyo. They met in Kento's office, a room Mira had never been allowed to enter in the penthouse. Here he'd pulled her in immediately, settling her in the chair beside his desk rather than making her wait outside, another small revolution in their marriage. "The Huang situation is resolved," Sato reported in Japanese. Mira understood every word now. Kento had stopped hiding his business conversations from her. The execution was witnessed by representatives from the other syndicates. The message was clear. "Good," Kento said. "And the territory integration?" "Smooth. We've absorbed their operations without resistance. Several of Huang's former captains have requested audiences to pledge loyalty. Vet them thoroughly. I want backgrounds, family connections, any possible conflicts of interest. If there's even a hint of divided loyalty, reject them." Sato nodded, making notes. Then he hesitated, glancing at Mira before continuing. "There's one more matter. Word has spread about the attack, about Mrs. Tanaka's involvement." Kento's posture shifted, becoming dangerous. "What kind of word?" "Respectful words, sir. The other families are impressed. A Yakuza wife who fights beside her husband rather than hiding is unprecedented. Several have requested formal introductions." Mira felt Kento's eyes on her, gauging her reaction. "What do you think?" he asked her directly, code switching to include her in the decision. "I think," Mira said carefully, "that we should use this. If the other families respect what I did, then my presence becomes an asset instead of a liability. It changes the narrative from Kento's weakness to Kento's partnership." Sato's eyebrows rose slightly. Kento's lips curved into a smile. "Arrange the meetings," Kento told Sato. "But on our terms, here in Hakone. They come to us." "Yes, sir." After Sato left, Kento pulled Mira onto his lap, his arms wrapping around her waist. "You're a natural at this," he murmured against her ear. "Reading the politics, understanding the power dynamics." "I had a good teacher," Mira said. "Even if he didn't know, he was teaching me." She thought of all those dinners with dangerous men, all those parties where violence simmered beneath polite conversation. She'd been learning this world for 3 years without realizing it. "I want to be more involved," she said, turning to face him. "Not just in the social aspects. I want to understand your business, your operations, your strategies." Kento studied her face. "Why?" "Because you're not the only one who was living half a life," Mira admitted. "I was an art curator before you. I had ambitions, dreams, a career I loved. Then I became your wife and lost all of that." She cupped his face in her hands. "I don't regret choosing you, but I need purpose beyond being protected. Let me help you build this empire. Let me be your partner in every sense." Something fierce and proud blazed in Kento's eyes. "Done," he said simply. "Starting tomorrow, you sit in on every meeting, every decision. You learn the business from the ground up." He kissed her, hard and possessive. "My beautiful, dangerous wife." That night, they soaked in the private onsen under a sky full of stars. The hot spring water was perfect. Not too hot, mineral-rich, surrounded by carefully placed rocks and pine trees that made it feel like they were the only 2 people in the world. Mira floated on her back, staring up at the Milky Way, Kento's arm around her waist, keeping her anchored. "Tell me about her," she said quietly. "Your first love, the one who died." Kento's arm tightened fractionally. "Why?" "Because she's part of your story, part of what made you into the man I love. I want to know her." For a long moment, Kento said nothing. Then, "Her name was Yuki. We grew up together. She was the daughter of my father's closest friend." His voice was distant, remembering. "We were going to get married, build a legitimate business together, leave this world behind." Mira stayed silent, letting him talk. "But my father's enemies found out about her, used her to get to him. His voice cracked. "They tortured her for 3 days, sent my father pieces of her as a message. Mira's breath caught. Kento. By the time we found her, she was barely alive. She died in my arms, begging me to let her go. His hand found Mira's in the water, gripping tight. I was 17, and I swore I would never love anyone again, never give my enemies that kind of leverage. But then you met me, Mira said softly. But then I met you, Kento agreed, and everything I'd promised myself became impossible. I fell in love with you the night I saved you, the way you looked at me, not with fear, but with trust, like you knew somehow that I would never hurt you. He pulled her closer, pressing his forehead against hers. I tried so hard not to love you, married you to protect you, then kept you at arm's length to protect myself. But it didn't work. Every day I loved you more. Every night it killed me not to touch you. So you watched me instead, Mira said, wrote about me, photographed me, loved me in secret. Yes, it was torture and salvation all at once. Mira kissed him, tasting salt and mineral water and 3 years of longing. Yuki would want you to be happy, she whispered against his lips. She'd want you to live, not just survive. I know, Kento said. I know that now. The next morning, Mira woke to find Kento already dressed in a sharp black suit, sitting at the edge of the bed with something in his hands. I have something for you, he said. He held out a small wooden box, lacquered black with gold chrysanthemums painted on the lid. Inside was a ring, not the enormous diamond he'd given her at their wedding, but something simpler, more meaningful. A platinum band with a single black pearl, surrounded by tiny diamonds. I bought this 3 years ago, Kento said quietly, the day after our wedding. I was going to give it to you on our first anniversary, but... He trailed off. But you were too afraid, Mira finished. Yes. He took her left hand, sliding the ring onto her finger beside her wedding band. This is my promise to you. No more distance. No more secrets. No more hiding. The ring fit perfectly. The black, pearl gleaming in the morning light. I love you, Kento said, the words raw and honest. I have loved you since the moment I saw you. I will love you until my last breath, and I will spend the rest of my life proving that you didn't make a mistake choosing me. Mira's throat tightened with emotion. I love you too. Even when I thought you hated me, I loved you. I never stopped. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. I don't deserve you, he whispered into her hair. No, Mira agreed, pulling back to look at him. You deserve better. You deserve someone who was born into this world, who understood it from the beginning. Someone who could have protected themselves, who didn't need saving. She cupped his face in her hands. But you're stuck with me instead. An art curator who learned to shoot in a panic room. A woman who thought silk sheets were romantic until they became chains. A wife who was too stubborn to leave even when you pushed her away. Kento's laugh was half sob. You're everything I never knew I needed. Then let's stop talking about deserving, Mira said, and start talking about choosing. I choose you, Kento, every day, every moment for the rest of my life. And I choose you, he replied, my wife, my partner, my equal. He kissed her then, soft and reverent and full of promise, not the desperate passion of the past few days, but something deeper, more permanent. This was a kiss that said, we made it. We survived. We're finally home. 6 months later, Mira stood in the same penthouse bedroom where everything had changed. The renovation was complete. Bulletproof windows, reinforced walls, security systems that would make a military base jealous. But Kento had also made it softer. More lived in. There were bookshelves now, filled with Mira's art history collection. A reading nook by the window where she could watch the city. Photographs on the walls, not hidden in drawers anymore, but displayed proudly, their story in images. She heard Kento's footsteps behind her, felt his arms wrap around her waist, his hand settling protectively over her still flat stomach. Are you sure? He asked for the 100th time. I'm sure, Mira said, covering his hand with hers. I want this. I want our family. I want everything with you. But the danger will always exist, Mira interrupted, turning in his arms. "We can't live our lives afraid, Kento. We tried that. It didn't work." She placed his hand back on her stomach. "This baby will be loved, protected, raised by parents who chose each other despite impossible odds. That's more than most children get." Kento's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I'm terrified." "Good," Mira said, smiling. "That means you're human. That means you care. That means you're going to be an amazing father." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips, soft, reverent touches that spoke of wonder and fear and overwhelming love. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For staying, for fighting, for refusing to let me destroy us with my fear." His voice broke. "For loving me enough to save me from myself." Mira pulled him down until their foreheads touched. "We saved each other," she said simply. And in the bedroom where their marriage had almost ended, where secrets had been revealed and walls had finally crumbled, Kento held his wife, his partner, his equal, the mother of his child, and finally understood what he'd been too afraid to believe for 3 years. Love wasn't death. Love was the only thing worth living for.